Hello YouTube, and welcome back to my garden. And we're just going to have a look at this planter this morning. Things are moving on. It's the 9th of June now. Come back from a holiday. Plants have survived the drought since I was away. What I did was I took this tray where I sowed the oxeye daisies and those courgettes and those cosmos, and I gave them a really good water and put them in the shade where the sun really gets, as well as this lovely rose bush, which is my wife's Mothering Sunday's present, and they survived, which is good. So now we're going to just get this planter up and going for the year. We'll just say that I've tied in this clematis. One of those strands just died for some weird reason, and what I've done up here, the shoots have outgrown those supports, so it's now being tied into the wire supports, and I've used there some raffia ties. And if you're in the UK and you've got a Wilkinson's near you, you can get 2 raffia tie rolls. That's one of them, and about 80 grams all in all. That'll stay good for the year, and when you finish you can put it in the compost bin. It'll rot down. That's recycling, but the trouble is they put it in a plastic bag. Dear me. But £2, that's not bad, and Wilkinson's do not sponsor me for that little bit of advice. Now, I have already planted out 3 cosmos. What I did before I went on holiday was wonder if these will fare better in the tray or planted out. And I think, with the exception of that one there, which wasn't that size when I came back from holiday, the one there and the one there were about the same size as the ones that were still in the shade and in the tray. So at least for the time that I put them out, that didn't make much difference to their growing rates. But I'm going to plant some of these cosmos out in this planter today, and a few more just dotted along the border, which you know and maybe love. So I'm also going to plant out some of these oxeye daisies. Just going to get the bigger ones, thin them out a bit, put the bigger ones in this planter, and the rest will also go along the border, but once some of those have been thinned out, hopefully the others will grow a bit, because in the border they're going to get swamped and I might miss them for watering. At least here I can see what's going on. First we'll clear the space and I think dampen down the soil, maybe compact it. It is quite loose, so we'll just get on with that. And before my holiday I noticed that my red pepper plant, which was somewhere here, has just disappeared. That's gone the way of the world. Didn't even see it dying. Oh dear me. Now you might have caught sight in the back, some bindweed just growing up. It's from my neighbour's garden. And I did have some glyphosate weed killer, and I used it very occasionally. One bottle has so far lasted me probably about 4 or 5 years. I only ever use it for the weed that is called mind your own business, that creeps in again from next door, and for the long strands of bindweed. Trouble is, you try and dig up bindweed, the roots are so deep you're liable to break it off before you get it all up, and it'll just re-sprout from there, and it's very very strong, very fast growing, gets all over the place. and if it's coming in from next door, what can you do about it? So glyphosate, I was told, just loses its action once it hits water and the soil. It's okay on leaves, but I did watch a documentary on Netflix called Kiss the Ground or Kiss the Soil. Very interesting, I'd recommend it. And it talks about some other damaging things that glyphosate does. So even though I used it once or twice a year, only on very specific little weeds or big weeds, I have thrown that in the bin. So one way of getting rid of bindweed is to torch it. For that we need a blowtorch. And all you do is you just heat that leaf until it starts to wilt. And that should be enough. It'll die over the next few days. And apparently what that does, as well as just burning off that leaf, it sends signals down to the roots to kill things off. It's not going to be a total once and for all treatment, that, but over time that should work on that strand. The trouble is there's just so much of it in the soil, different strands are going to come up from different places, bits are going to break off. That's why they call it a pernicious weed. Right, the water's settled down a bit now, so time to prick out a few of these cosmoses and get them planted. There's one. Actually, let's get all this clump out, probably be easier to break them up then. So, not break them up. Tease the roots apart gently without damaging anything. I shouldn't be holding the stem, should I? When you are handling seedlings, you shouldn't hold the stem, because if you break that, that's it. So I'm holding it there by one of the seed leaves, avoiding the true leaves. Right, over to the oxeye daisies. What I'm going to do when I sow these out is just put a little stick of bamboo right by it, because the leaves are very similar to some of the weeds that grow quite readily and quite quickly here. I don't want to weed out the daisies, so that's what I'm doing for that. I can tell what a verbena is and what a cosmos is, but not with the oxide, not easily anyway, so that's why I'm doing that. Oh, there's a worm in there, that's a good sign. Like the verbena, the oxeye daisies are perennials, so if they're in the wrong place I can move them later on. If I've got too many or too few, or too many together. And just as a final flourish, I'm going to sprinkle a few cornflower seeds willy-nilly about the place. The sun's about to burst onto this end piece here, and it will be in hot baking sun for most of the day. I'm going to plant just in a little section some basil, which loves heat. You might ask why not just grow them in containers, but I try to avoid container gardening where I can. You've got to continually water them, and I think just lots of containers around the place is messy. That's why I like this big raised bed. It's one big container, it's just a raised bit of ground with just a bit of wood around the outside. It's about halfway between a container and open ground. That's good. But yeah, lots and lots of pots. It just feels cluttered. There's enough clutter in this garden as it is. Let's go and see what else is happening. Well, the courgette seeds that I sowed the same day I did the cosmos and the oxeye daisy, they're doing well. That one left particularly. It's not quite ready to go out into a nice big pot. You'll see the deep glistening red of a couple of strawberries that's grown in my chimney pots. Haven't really, apart from these two chimney pots here and here, which have been largely neglected this year. I haven't really concentrated too much on strawberries. There's so much else I want to get done in the garden. And I find strawberry plants are going all summer. You get one small flush from them. They are very nice, but it's a lot of effort for small return. Until I get things better organised and can grow many more strawberry plants, that's not something I'm going to concentrate on for this summer. Now, bearish patch of ground. I've weeded this. This is that area that's that bit is one son's garden, that bit is the other son's garden. I'm going to ask my other son if this tree, which is going to blend in with this privet, can go. That'll probably go at the end of the year though, because I don't want to disrupt the soil. When I sowed the cornflower in the big blue planter, I wet this ground and sowed some more cornflower there, and I'll sow some more of that wild seed mix here as well. Avid followers of this channel, of which there are some, will be very keen to say, hang on a minute, didn't you do that 2 or 3 episodes ago? And indeed I did, and I saw lots of green sprouts and wild seeds, despite the fact that they grow well in the wild without anybody caring for them. These are the ones that died out when I was on holiday because we weren't watering them. So a little bit of a mixture there, throw that around. And I'll cover that with soil in a minute. Let's move on. Again, just before holiday, and to save it drying out in a pot, I planted out that other pot of Japanese bloodgrass. You can see why professional filming takes so long, because you want to get the right time of day for the colour. This gorgeous sunlight is a bit too much for this, but you can see that. There we go. Now, a little aside, this does have a point to Japanese bloodgrass. If you're in the UK, and in the summer of 2021 when I'm filming this and soon to broadcast this, it's very grand, isn't it? Post it online. You have the availability of watching quite a few decent gardening channels. There is, of course, the staple BBC Gardener's World, normally on a Friday night, BBC Two. There is also on BBC iPlayer, on Catch Up, you can get Your Garden Made Perfect, which is very interesting, a bit more of the garden design. And then over on Channel 4, there's Great Garden Revolution, only a 4-part series, unfortunately. I came back from holiday longing to see what I presumed would be at least 2 more episodes, but they stopped at episode 4. That's really good. And when I was disappointed at not being able to see the rest of that series, any more of that series, I saw one of these things, if you like this, you'll like this. And also on Channel 4, on the Catch Up, there is a program called Real Gardens. Now that's from the year 2000, and you see a rather younger looking Monty Don, who's now of course Mr. Gardener on BBC, Mr. Gardener for the UK I think. He's presenting this Channel 4 program, and they go to real people's gardens, which may or may not be anything special, and it's a 24-minute program, so he presents rather quicker than he does on Gardener's World. It's interesting. And that's a good thing as well. There's about 21 episodes to keep you going, and they cover a few people's gardens through the year. Just real life situations, nothing staged or set up for cameras unnecessarily. But anyway, they were looking around a show for some plants for one of the people, and they came across Japanese bloodgrass, and they said, "Oh, it's a bit too slow growing." You're telling me? I thought this was going to romp away. That's just that one pot. Do you remember a few episodes ago I had those 2 pots, I separated them. Let's just go back to the planter. That one's one of the better growing ones, as is that one. So not much. So to be honest, a lot of this is for next year. I mean, I don't think I'm going to get a great display of those oxeye daisies this year. The verbenas are going to settle down a bit, hopefully, and the bloodgrass needs to get going, and of course strawberries. This garden would be fantastic next year. Don't we always say that? Anyway, So it's heartening to know that I'm probably not doing anything wrong with Japanese bloodgrass. Maybe separating it out into all those different shoots was a bit of a mistake, but to know it's slow growing, fair enough. That'll bulk up. I can separate that in the autumn or winter or spring. Now, a few years ago, I bought some allium bulbs, and they flowered for a few years, and then they didn't. And then this year, all of a sudden, that one's flowered and already gone to seed, and this one's flowered and almost going to seed. So it's nice to see them again, and like bigger version of the chives, which are just starting to fade now. Now the great thing about these is they have provided a nice load of colour, big bit of greenery, and lots of bee food in the hungry gap of April and May, where there's not a lot. Although I've got to say, in this garden I've had blossom on the pear trees and the apple trees, I've had the blossom on the rosemary plant, I've had the tulips, there's now flowering on the thyme. Let's just have a look at that. Here's some self-sown thyme. The bees love that as well. They don't particularly like my clover up there, which when you're not mowing over it just rockets away. It's quite interesting. So that's going to be composted. And sorry, I was talking about chives, wasn't I? You can tell this isn't scripted and directed. The good thing about chives is those flowers in the next few weeks will start to look pretty yucky, that are past their best. I will trim all that down, and I will lift a few of the bigger clumps, divide them out and spread them further along this border, because what I had here last year was a big Michaelmas daisy plant. You can still see a little shoot of it that escaped there, and now that's gone. I look out from the window and I think, oh, this bit is bare, that those purple pom-poms should really extend back this way a bit. So I'm going to extend that. I'm also going to put a few in the front garden because I need to fill the gap. Right, I'm spending a lot of your time here. Just also to let you know, we've got the first flower of the carnation. That plant, and another one further up the garden, comes from my wedding buttonhole. So the day I got married, I wore a red carnation, and I kept that carnation, stuck it in some soil. That is the plant that came from it. So it's quite a nice remembrance. Don't really want to get rid of that. And at the background, I think I mentioned it, I didn't show it going on at the time, sweet peas. So they're looking okay. I've tied them in. Now what I did before the holiday, with a bit of string, was to tie them to a little bamboo support. And after holiday I've come back and tied in the grown-up bits. And after I came back from holiday I tied in the higher bits. But it's interesting, these first few along here, well, I say first few, they're dotted around every so often, and I planted them out in little clumps. So I bought 2 pots, broke them up, didn't separate them to individual plants because they don't like too much root disturbance. So I planted them out every so often along here. I didn't initially tie in some of these ones. I'll just get the camera in through the gap there. But I've tied them in since coming home, and because they weren't supported and upright for the first few weeks like the other ones were, they're not doing so well. Either that or the soil here is different or the climate's different. But there we are. And apart from that thing that's taken my time in the garden, is the shed. Or rather the lack of shed. Let's get into some shade. That's where my shed was. Now nothing there now. That's the last remnants of the base. So the new shed is going here, possibly even over on the bit where I'm standing. And then hopefully you get some structure to the last end bit of the garden. Although, let's get back to the sunshine. The sunlight coming through here of an evening is absolutely gorgeous. I don't want to block that out, even though it shouldn't really actually block out the sunlight, but you feel that it would. I was thinking it would be nice to have kind of a platform to sit out here on, but it does get very sticky and sappy this time of year, so I'm not entirely convinced exactly what size and shape of shed I want there. It's still in the design phase, but it would be good to get something done, get a whole load of this rubbish thrown away, and get the end of this garden looking a bit more like the other end of the garden, which looks a bit messy because I've got all my seed and seed trays out at the moment. Anyway, this is Dad Tube on my garden. Checking out for time being, and we'll see you again shortly. Bye!